Hello all, Game Methuselah. Well, the Santa Ana winds are blowing today, and it's warm. I wore one of my many Hawaiian shirts. I often wish that I lived someplace where the weather was terrible, and then everybody forced to stay inside, and I would get to game more, because I think most of you have figured out by now that I'm pretty much a game fanatic. A couple things to go over. I appreciate all the feedback from the last video on things you want to see. And I was really concerned because a lot of people said they wanted to hear more of the fantasy trip. They want to hear the old war stories from the game, which I always try to seed in with some story that ties into your campaigns or ties into the game. They like to see the Monster Mambo, which is also great. But I think the feeling is that I'm the only voice out there on the internet that is basically talking about anything other than Dungeons and Dragons. I like Dungeons & Dragons. You know I play it. I played it in 0 edition. In fact, my preference is to actually play 0 edition or 4th edition. But I stumble along in 5th and do the best I can. I think I'm going to become the mayor of the island of Misfit role-playing games, or any games, or toys. It really doesn't matter. But I think I will get Yukon Cornelius and the Abominable Snowman to help me gather up all these unloved role-playing games, and even unloved board games and miniature games. Some of them are so fantastic, and start talking about them. I likely won't get as many viewers because, well, it's not D&D, but there really isn't anything I give you in the strategy and tactics and the monster mambos and everything else that I talk about in role-playing that really is important what system you use. The decision, of course, is what system do you want to use? Now, most people want to play whatever the current hot system is, and that's the smartest way to go. D&D 5th or Pathfinder, maybe a couple other games. Obviously, Fantasy Trip has just kickstarted, so there is some more interest in that. But there's so many great game systems out there that nobody plays. And my friend Don has a very interesting view on some of these games. He actually likes it, sort of, when the games die. But they're no longer out there in the world to be abused by the manufacturers and game designers. They are going to only be modified by your house rules, by how you decide these games should be played. And there is a lot to that. I mean, I loved 4th edition D&D a ton. I know I was in the minority. And it was the thing that brought me back to really enjoying D&D. I mean, I was playing 3.5 with my group. It was so hard to prep up an adventure in that system that compared to everything else in D&D that it just was not fun to game master it. It would take me many hours to prep up a game where for a 4th edition game or a fantasy trip game, I can prep up in 30 minutes. So there's lots that I'm going to be wanting to talk about different games, different types of systems. But I want to talk to you about lots of different games, and we'll go into that. And when I do Monster Mambos, I might do them in different game systems and then show you how that directly relates into Dungeons & Dragons. Because really the idea is to know enough about what is going on in your campaign and to understand the creatures and NPCs in that world that you can modify them from any game system to another. And I do that now. That's all a matter of becoming an effective game master, and it's not difficult. My feeling is most people who are running 5th edition for you currently aren't anywhere near as effective as they can be because they're basically running modules. And the problem with running modules is you have hours and hours of prep time for every adventure because you have to read the module. And if you don't really read it in detail, often a great deal of the story is completely missed. You didn't know you missed it. Your players never saw that they didn't get it. But suddenly in the future, when they want to refer back to that in a future module, it's not there. That's why I always, and I know I'm a broken record, harken on the idea of building your own campaign. I want to talk to you about how you build your own campaigns. First, I want to talk about one quick thing. This Saturday, the 11th, I will be at my place in Garden Grove. Now, I've used very sophisticated, high-tech items here to show you. This is the address. I will look at it. Let me put my glasses on and get rid of my vanity. It's 13271 Harbor Boulevard, Suite J, as in Jim, in Garden Grove, California. It's right off the 22 freeway if you went north going to the Disneyland. Now, here it is again. I'll be there about 10 o'clock. We'll play till I get bored and throw everybody out. I expect it's really going to be me and the four walls. But if some people show up, bring your campaigns, bring your game systems, bring your board games, things you love, bring your paints, bring your miniatures. We'll talk about whatever it is you guys want to do. I'm going to try to get some of my friends to come down. Maybe we can run some games. Maybe I can show modules if you want to bring a camera down and video some stuff. I'm hoping to basically get 2 Fridays a month for Friday night role playing. That was always my favorite night to role play. Unfortunately, it seems that as you get older, people don't like Friday night, but Friday night's great. It's not a date night. It's not a school night. You know, most people are free the next day, so that they get together and role play on Fridays. You can recover Saturday and go have fun with your significant other or see your family or whatever you need to do on the weekends. And that's how it was with me. I found that trying to run games during the weekend was always difficult because whatever family thing or party or barbecue or you name it came up, it always came up on a weekend day. And then it's like, oh, we can't make it to role playing. There's a million things in life that get in the way. Most people who game understand that. I want to get more going, and I want you to have a broader understanding of the gaming world and see other opportunities as things get presented. You know, as you decide for yourself you want to run a campaign. And that's kind of what I want to talk about just briefly today. We'll expand upon it as we go. But the thing is, I've had some interesting questions from people, and one of them really was unique to me, and I didn't answer him yet. And I think this is going to be his answer. He asked me who the big bad guy was in my Twilight of Fae Albion campaign. Now, I was going to be flippant and just say, you know, it's all up to you. But let me tell you what I thought. If you were watching The Expanse, which you guys know is one of my favorite shows, and you know I'd like to run a Traveler game in it, you have 3 factions. You have Earth, you have Mars, you have the Belters. They hate each other. They're fighting, they're scrambling, they're manipulating, they're trying to utilize, often very much like the politics that's in our world. Things are coming to a head and there's going to be a war. Not really started by anything meaningful necessarily, except for the protomolecule and what ends up happening from that. But the fact that each one of them doesn't trust the other, and they're going to take advantage or mess with them or screw them over, and they all have to be prepared when that moment happens. Bigger guns, bigger ships, more spies, more badness, platforms. You get it. Just like our real world. People don't look at the big picture. They look at the small picture. And the thing about it is, everybody in that story thinks they are right. That's what goes on in my Albion campaign. A major war between the Fomorians and the elves and the humans has all been fought. The humans and the Fomorians allied against the more powerful elves and were able to hit them when they were weak, and thusly a large Pyrrhic war was fought with effectively everybody losing. Maybe the Fomorian-human alliance won. In true reality, it's the humans that won. Because as you know, I'm basing this on Earth, a true reality in a medieval, or actually in this case, ancient England. We all know where the world is now. Elves and fairies and fae folk are all myths. Fomorians have all been lost to the sands of time. We know then who's won the war. But at this point, it's all up in the air. Humans look at it and they say, the elves are evil. They want to keep us down. They're not going to let us do anything. If we step into anything that they consider their land, which they consider pretty much everything their land, they kill us wholesale without any mercy. The Fomorians, well, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. We don't really like them. We think they're brash and mean, scary, not necessarily interested in the well-being of humanity. They're better than the alternative. So thusly, we will ally with someone we don't like to fight against someone we really hate. The elves. The elves look at the humans as rodents. They are basically breeding like rabbits and are going to destroy the world. Magic and all of Fae will die when the humans crawl over everything and suck the mana out of the great world, which for the most part has been Fae. And that is the history that the elves have seen. They have seen it through the ancient world. And now, as they fall back to their last bastion of Albion, they realize that it's this. It is now or never. that Fae and the elves will only live if they can stem the tide here. That's the elven view. The trolls, the Fomorian, are evil. They want to destroy the world. They want to strip the valuable items out of the earth. They want to tear down all the trees and build giant fortresses. They want the elves gone. They don't care. They want to rule. They're tired of the hoity-toity elves being beyond reproach and unassailable in their power. They wait to the right moment when the great heroes and the king is off fighting a quest, and they attack with their human allies. And that's the war. The weird thing about it is, like all of life, everybody thinks they're right. The elves think they're right. The humans think they're right. The Fomorians think they're right. Just like what you see in most of the reality. Just like what you see in The Expanse. Just like history. Most people always want to be on the right side. The Nazi Germans had a belt buckle, and on their belt buckle it said Gott mit uns. Really? They thought God was on their side? That's the problem. The problem is, if you can build a big enough mythology, you can get people to do all kinds of terrible things. Sadly, it is the fear I always have. We might live out one of my role-playing campaigns for real. Now, sometimes I use real big bad guys, and I did. One of our campaigns, the Fantasy Trip, which was one of the best we ever ran, multiple game masters. Don had Utumno, the Kingdom of the Orcs, and I had Tolmorn and the Vampire King. This was all based upon a game I had played, and I loved the idea that this necromancer and this vampire lord were trying to take over all of the human realm. And then I thought, wait a minute, there it is. Tolmorn is dead. He's in Hades, and it's all been killed by the heroes, and the threat of the undeads are over. But the vampire lord is not ready to give up. So he finds a way to send people in to steal Cerberus, to get a leash that can control him and drag him out of Hades. And while he's fighting to get released, and while the Lord of the Underworld is trying to find him, they're not looking at the front gate. The vampire king of his great power goes into the underworld. He finds Tolmor and brings him out. But he says, wait, on the way out, let's take the lantern of Hades. The lantern of Hades is the light that people see when they die that guides them into the hereafter. Well, he now has it. So now, when anybody dies, they don't go to the afterworld. They come to the Vampire King and Tolmor, the Lord of the Necromancers. This is how my campaign is. So that every battle that takes place, two things happen. Humans and undeads clash in a major battle. The humans kill 10,000 undeads, destroy them to the world. Humans lose 2,000 fine warriors. It is very sad, but it has been a tremendous victory. The next morning, out in front of the gates, are all the undeads that survived, plus 12,000 more. The 10,000 that the humans had killed, that had been resurrected by the necromancers, and the 2,000 humans that died in the battle, who instead of going off to the great underworld, into the great afterlife, into the just deserves for them, have now been brought on as zombies in the undead army. The fear level that was raised in the campaign was awesome. You couldn't win. Even by winning, you lost. Very much like the White Walkers, who, by the way, I was rooting for in Game of Thrones. And that makes it very, very scary. They don't have to be individually nasty. They just have to be basically incapable of being destroyed. Ponder these and think, what would you like to run? But the best thing about it, like my original Albion game, is don't do everything. Start small. A little village, a little thorp, a little area. It's often good to steal a world map, find something you like. Now with Albion, I had the Albion map from the game. It's great. If you love Lord of the Rings, it's fabulous. There was a great game system out there years ago called Rolemaster. They then made a expansion, which they called Middle-earth Role-Playing, which was a condensed and eased-down version of their original Rolemaster rules. A little easier, but less color. But it worked. But all the people who were really serious, well, we went back and played Rolemaster in the Middle-earth setting. But the beautiful thing they did is they made all of these adventure books for the Middle Earth. They had all the human realms of Arthedain and alike. They had the Hobbits, where you had Bree and Hobbiton and all these places. You had the Dunlanders, you had the Corsairs, you had all the Dark Realms and the Orcish Realms. You had the Mines of Moria and the Goblin King's forests. You had everything all there, broken down for you. Now, they weren't so much individual adventures, even though there were some adventures there. What it really was maps and descriptions and castles and undergrounds and things that were there that you could then populate with all of your creations and thoughts and desires for your role-playing campaign. We loved it. I played it to death with Steve. It maybe was one of the greatest games we ever played. But we were a few in number of people who played it. Now, there's boatloads of other things out there, and we will start talking about them all on the island of Misfit role-playing games. If my video runs long, I might edit this out. But somebody asked me how I can run all my adventures out of 3x5 boxes. Now, I don't run all of them. I do have a 3-ring binder, and a lot of times I'll make bigger maps and do whatever. But I wanted to show you something. Now, for those of you who saw the video I did on the fantasy trip game that I ran with my friends, this is the map of where they went, the Old Normish Ruin. First level, second level, third level, fourth level, fifth level. I wanted it mostly empty. I wanted the idea of it being a ruin and that it was being utilized by the kobolds to try to bring forth a dragon so that they could have someone to worship. And the elves, well, they were desperate. They steal the egg, the golden dragon egg from the humans. They bring it out to the kobolds to say, hey, we're going to give you this egg and we need these things from you. The other thing that came along with that was really fun for me is I decided to transfer and create a shambling mound for the fantasy trip, which of course all you know is a Dungeons and Dragons creature. How does it get created? Well, it gets created by the murder vine. The idea is that the murder vine could bring out so much of its power, or in this case, because it's fantasy trip, strength, diminish itself slightly, and produce a shambling mound. Now, their fighting abilities came pretty much right out of the Dungeons and Dragons items. They were immune to lightning, just like they are in the D&D manual. Unfortunately, one of my players actually hit it with lightning and was pretty unhappy to find out that being the case. But the nice thing about it is it worked. It worked perfectly. And I've since run Grell, Mind Flayers, Kobolds, other things which I have transferred and given special abilities for them. Kobolds are really easy. What I do in the fantasy trip for them is I make them very weak, about as weak as it's possible to make anything. But I give them an ability to stack 2 in a space. It doesn't sound like a lot until you actually sit and think about it. Twice as many attacks. Doesn't do any damage. Most of the time they'll do no damage because the armor and defense of the defender will likely stop it all. But if a critical is rolled, you got a chance to hurt the heroes. And if you got twice as many rolls, it's a lot easier to do that, to get a critical and cause problems. This actually caused some consternation with some of the players that I thought I was bending the rules a little bit too far. But this happens. In even the original D&D, right in the beginning of the game, it says the game master can do whatever he wants. The idea is to make a challenging and wonderful story that goes on for your players. With a restriction on what they can do, you want them to be able to do all kinds of things. Whatever they can imagine, whatever they can do. If they want to run a modification on a character that they have now, let them do it. Find a way to do it. I did it with Matt Colville when he did our Albion campaign, where he did the Atlantean Paladin, and it was brilliant. Now, I knew he was really smart, and it wasn't really going to require anything from me, so I said, Matt, do what you want. I'm sure it'll work out perfectly, and it did. Maybe with other players, you need to tweak it a little bit. It just requires a little thinking. And the best thing about it, it gives you an opportunity with your players to sit down and discuss your campaign. Find out what they think, what they want. You don't want to make what I fear of programmed adventures, what my friend Kevin said. If the only way I can win the game is your way, why am I playing? If the outcome is going to be the same. And that is the most important thing I can spread to you. Yes, modules are great. Use them, steal them, take their ideas, reskin them, do whatever you want to do. But if you live and die by these modules, A, people are going to have read them. You want to make it so the great joy of the game is the players. More likely even love being a DM. But truly, I'd rather be a player. I mean, I really enjoy playing so much. I DM a lot because, well, one, there always has to be somebody who games master, and often it's my turn in the barrel. And secondly, I kind of don't suck at it. So it ends up with me often being drafted to be the games master. And I don't object. I like it. And as you know, being a minimalist game master is not that difficult for me. One of my friends who's watched some of my videos now, who's played with me for 40 plus years, says, you know, your games are not as good now as they used to be when you weren't a minimalist game master. Please don't tell him. I've always been a minimalist game master. I always had a life, other things to do. There was only so many hours in the day. So I would rather paint than write modules. So I would come up with an idea and I'd scribble it down and I'd reskin a dungeon or find something I had run before that no one's going to remember, or found somebody that somebody else drew that nobody, of course, has ever seen, redesign it, change it from this to that, make it an old monastery for paladins. Nobody's going to know the difference. Add a couple rooms, ta-da, it's now mine. And I did this over 40 years ago. And everybody bought it. Because you do enough work that it makes sure that they understand. Now, at first, you're going to do a lot of work. Because, like I said, the thing about it is I convert modules over to an entirely different game system. There's no formula for this. It takes an art. And the art you'll acquire if you fall in love with another game system. And you don't have to. I mean, believe me, I will tell you, there is nothing wrong with Dungeons and Dragons. It's just a matter of what it is you want to do for your players. I'm just saying that I think that you should embellish and put your character into your games. 100% modules to begin with, maybe 80% modules the next time, maybe 70%, 60%. You get the idea. Because I actually don't want to look behind the curtain and miss some of the magic. But there's lots I want to talk about. So this has been a little longer than I wanted, but I wanted you to sort of get the idea of what we're doing. Basically plan on the idea that if you're in Southern California, or you want to come to Southern California and see Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Universal Studios, the beautiful beach, Hollywood, San Diego, you name it, go wild. There's so many things to see here. I mean, it is in many ways kind of the hub of the world. And it's fun here, but come down maybe every other Fridays. We'll start talking about it, when that's going to happen. Maybe you want to come down and run a game. I'd love to play. Maybe you want to run The Expanse in any game system. I'd love to play. I mean, you could sucker me in, but there's lots coming up and lots we're going to do. So until I have a chance to speak with you again, I hope you all had a great New Year and everybody was safe and their Christmas was good and they got what they wanted. But fight me, devils, fight, for I hate peace. Game on.